On January 3, 2026 at 2:01 a.m., American Special Forces landed outside Caracas. 37 minutes later, Nicolas Maduro was in custody. By dawn, Venezuela's state oil company, PDVSA, was under new management. 303 billion barrels of proven oil reserves. At current prices, $17.3 trillion, the largest resource transfer in modern history, executed in under 6 hours. This was not about democracy. It was not about human rights. It was not about the war on drugs. It was about oil. And if you think that is cynical, you are not paying attention to the pattern. Because when empires reach a specific stage of financial stress, when debt becomes mathematically unmanageable and currency credibility begins to crack, they stop relying on productivity. They start acquiring resources, not through trade, through force. Rome did it in the 3rd century, Britain did it in the 1930s, and the United States is doing it now. Not because of ideology, not because of strategy, because of mathematics. Drop a comment if you already see where this is going. Most people won't figure it out until it's too late. U.S. national debt, $36 trillion. Annual interest payments, $1.1 trillion, for the first time in history. Interest expense now growing faster than GDP. That is not a policy problem, that is a mathematical trap. And when you are in that trap, when your currency is backed by nothing but confidence and that confidence is eroding, you do what every empire has done. You convert paper claims into physical control, promises into possession, debt into assets. The Venezuela operation was not an anomaly. It was a symptom. Stage 4 of a pattern that has destroyed every reserve currency in recorded history. And if you understand this pattern, if you can see what is actually happening beneath the official narrative, the next 10 to 20 years become predictable. Not perfectly, but directionally. In the next 15 minutes, we at Geopolitics of Money will show you that pattern. We will prove it with historical precedent. We will reveal why resource acquisition always fails to solve the underlying problem. And we will identify the catastrophic moment when the only buyer left is the central bank itself. This is not speculation. This is pattern recognition. If this is your first time here, subscribe now. Because what I'm about to show you will change how you see every military intervention, every foreign policy decision, every financial headline from this point forward. Venezuela wasn't the first time. It's not even close. Let me show you something that once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Iraq, 2003. Libya, 2011. Syria, 2011 present. Venezuela, 2026. 4 operations. Different decades. Different official reasons. Same outcome. Before I explain the connection, pause and comment. What do you think these 4 operations have in common? I want to see if you can spot the pattern before I reveal it. But this pattern goes back way further than the 2000s. Rome, 3rd century AD. At its peak, the Roman denarius contained 94% silver. Real money. Real value. International commerce ran on Roman coins. But maintaining an empire across 3 continents was catastrophically expensive. Military campaigns, barbarian threats, administrative costs. Revenue couldn't keep pace. So Rome did what every empire does. They debased the currency, gradually reducing the silver content. By 100 AD, 85% silver. By 200 AD, 50% silver. By 265 AD, 0.5% silver. A 99% reduction in real value, and prices exploded 1,000% across the empire. Soldiers demanded higher wages as coins became worthless. Emperor Caracalla raised military pay 50% just to keep the army loyal. But here's the critical part. Rome had already plundered all the easy targets. Spain's silver mines, depleted. Dacia's gold mines, exhausted. So they did what desperate empires always do. They launched resource wars. Not for glory, for survival. Military campaigns targeting the last resource-rich regions. Desperate grabs for anything with tangible value. It bought 20 years, maybe 30. But it didn't solve the fundamental problem. Spending exceeded capacity. By 476 AD, the Western Roman Empire ceased to exist. Those holding land and gold survived. Those holding denarii, even wealthy Roman citizens, were destroyed. Fast forward to Britain, 1920s, 1940s. The British pound had been the global reserve currency for over 200 years. London was the financial capital of the world. But World War I turned Britain into a debtor nation for the first time in centuries. The costs of empire, military bases, colonial administration, naval fleets, were exceeding the benefits. Britain tried to maintain the pound's value. They returned to the gold standard in 1925. But the economy couldn't support it. Deflation, unemployment, social unrest. So Britain did what Rome had done 1,600 years earlier. They squeezed the colonies harder. India. Taxation increased, resources exported below market value. Africa. Gold, copper, diamonds extracted at accelerating rates. This wasn't prosperity-driven trade. This was desperation-driven extraction. And it worked, temporarily. Britain held on through the 1930s, but World War II drained the last reserves. By 1944, at Bretton Woods, the dollar, backed by 2/3 of the world's gold, replaced the pound. The transition took 20 years. Slow, painful, devastating for British savers. Their wealth evaporated, not overnight, but irreversibly. Same pattern, different centuries. Currency loses credibility. Empire intensifies resource extraction. System breaks anyway. And we're watching it happen again. Right now. If you know someone who still thinks U.S. foreign policy is about spreading democracy, share this video with them. They need to see the pattern. Here's why resource acquisition just accelerated. U.S. national debt in 2000, $5.6 trillion. In 2010, $13.5 trillion. In 2020, $27 trillion. Today, $36 trillion. As debt exploded, resource operations accelerated. Not randomly, mathematically. Because interest payments just crossed $1.1 trillion annually. That's more than defense spending, more than Medicare, more than any single budget item except Social Security, and it's accelerating exponentially. 2020, $345 billion in interest. 2025, $1.1 trillion. 2030 projection, $1.7 trillion. 2035 projection, $2.5 trillion. When interest expense grows faster than your economy, you enter a debt spiral. More borrowing to pay interest. More interest on the new borrowing. More borrowing to pay that interest. This is mathematical inevitability, not policy failure. Arithmetic. The Federal Reserve faces an impossible choice. Option 1. Raise rates to fight inflation. If rates hit 6%, interest on $36 trillion becomes $2.16 trillion per year. That's 45% of federal revenue. The government would have to cut spending in half or default. Neither is politically possible. Option 2. Keep rates low to service the debt. Debt stays manageable short term. But the currency loses purchasing power. Inflation destroys savings. Standard of living declines. There is no third option. This is fiscal dominance, when debt controls all policy. Former Fed Chair Janet Yellen just warned about this on January 5, 2026. The preconditions for fiscal dominance are clearly strengthening. Translation: we're entering the endgame. Question for you. Which comes first? Inflation destroying the dollar or default destroying the system? Drop your prediction in the comments. The best analysis gets pinned. When an empire recognizes this trap, it doesn't cut spending. It doesn't reform. It goes after hard assets. Because if your currency is losing credibility, you need something tangible to back it. Something that can't be printed. Something with intrinsic value. Oil, gold, strategic minerals, critical infrastructure. This is not imperialism. This is economic desperation, and it always accelerates in stage 4. Watch the sequence. Iraq, 2003. Official reason: weapons of mass destruction. No WMDs found, but 115 billion barrels of oil secured. Oh, and one detail most people forget. In November 2000, Saddam Hussein announced Iraq would sell oil in euros instead of dollars. By 2002, Iraq's oil sales were euro-denominated, threatening the petrodollar system. March 2003, invasion. June 2003, Iraqi oil sales back to dollars. Libya, 2011. Official reason: humanitarian intervention. But 6 months before NATO intervention, Gaddafi proposed a gold-backed African currency, the gold dinar, to settle oil sales outside the dollar system. 143 tons of Libyan gold, held in the central bank, vanished during the intervention. Never recovered. 48 billion barrels of oil under Western management. Syria, 2011 present. Official reason, counter-terrorism. Reality, strategic pipeline routes and Eastern Mediterranean positioning. Venezuela, 2026. Official reason, democracy and human rights. 303 billion barrels, $17.3 trillion in reserves. These aren't coincidences. Comment below. Can you see the pattern now? What's the one thing all four operations have in common? Here's the catastrophic part. Resource acquisition doesn't solve the underlying problem. It buys time. 5 to 15 years, sometimes less. Because the fundamental issue remains. The U.S. spends $1.8 trillion more than it collects every year. Even if Venezuela's 303 billion barrels were fully monetized, which would take decades and $180 billion in infrastructure, it doesn't close that gap. The math is absolute. You cannot seize enough resources to fund a structural deficit that large. And while empires focus externally, internal problems accelerate. Here's the terrifying signal that confidence is already breaking. 2025. 142,000 millionaires relocated internationally. Highest number ever recorded. 2026 projection. 165,000 millionaires relocating. This isn't tax optimization. This is capital flight. UK losing 1,600 millionaires. $66 billion leaving. China losing millionaires. India losing millionaires despite fastest growth. US seeing accelerating outflows. Where are they going? UAE. Singapore. Switzerland. Not for taxes. For protection. Because wealthy people with access to the best information are sensing what's coming. And they're moving before capital controls close the exits. And here's the other signal. Dollar's share of global reserves declined from 71% in 2000 to 58% in 2024. 13 percentage points. Slow, steady, irreversible. China and Russia settling trade in yuan and rubles. Saudi Arabia accepting yuan for oil sales to China. Not collapse. Erosion. And erosion is more dangerous than collapse. Because erosion is invisible until the foundation gives way. How are you positioning for this? Comment your strategy. In episodes 1, 2, and 3 we established China exited, $630 billion. India stepped away, $50 billion gold moved home. Hidden buyers, UK, Belgium, Japan, are absorbing the selling. But those substitutes are finite. The UK can't lever indefinitely without currency stress. Japan can't absorb without yen pressure. Belgium's custodial accounts have capacity limits. Eventually, they break. And when they do, only one buyer remains. The Federal Reserve. Not as lender of last resort, as buyer of last resort. The Fed begins purchasing treasuries directly to prevent yields from spiking. This is called yield curve control. Japan's been doing it for over a decade. It's permanent monetization. Central bank printing currency to buy government debt. Government issuing debt to fund deficits. Central bank printing more to buy more debt. That's not a market. That's a printing press funding a government. And once it starts, it can't stop. Because if the Fed stops buying, yields spike. If yields spike, debt becomes unserviceable. If debt becomes unserviceable, government must cut 40–50% or default. Neither will happen. So the Fed prints. And keeps printing. That's stage 6. Fiscal dominance complete. And the outcome is always the same. Currency debasement. Not overnight. Not with hyperinflation headlines. But through steady, irreversible loss of purchasing power. I track all of this in real time. If you want the early warning system, the signals before they hit headlines, hit subscribe. Because by the time CNBC reports this, it's already over. The most common objection. This time is different. Technology will save us. AI will drive productivity. Innovation will grow us out of debt. Here's why that's catastrophic thinking. Britain had the Industrial Revolution. Greatest technological leap in history until the digital age. Steam power revolutionized manufacturing. Railways transformed logistics. Telegraph created instant communication. It didn't prevent the pound's collapse. Because the problem isn't productivity. It's the relationship between spending and capacity. When government spending exceeds revenue by 6 to 7% of GDP annually for decades, no amount of productivity growth solves that. You'd need sustained 5 to 6% GDP growth for 20+ years. Has never happened. Won't happen. Because productivity gains get absorbed by demographic costs, aging populations, legacy obligations, pensions, Social Security, Medicare, and interest expense itself. Even if AI doubles productivity from 1.5% to 3% growth, it doesn't close a 6% structural deficit. The math doesn't care about innovation. The pattern executes regardless. And believing this time is different is the most dangerous position you can take. Because it prevents recognition, it prevents preparation, it ensures you're holding the wrong assets when the system resets. Every empire believed it was different. They were all wrong. This time is never different. The pattern is absolute. This isn't about panic. It's about pattern recognition. Here are the exact signals I'm watching. 1. Resource acquisition patterns. When military operations increasingly target strategic resources, oil, gold, minerals, Stage 4 is accelerating. 2. Central bank gold purchases. Not gold prices, purchases. When Western central banks accumulate physical gold, they're de-risking paper. 3. Fiscal dominance indicators. When interest crosses 15% of revenue, monetary policy becomes subordinate to debt service. 4. Millionaire migration. When the wealthy flee in record numbers, confidence is breaking. 5. Dollar reserve composition. When central banks accelerate diversification, Endgame is approaching. These don't appear in headlines. They appear in data. Which of these 5 signals concerns you most? Comment below. I want to see what this community is watching. The pattern is entering its final stages. Stage 4, resource acquisition. Executing now. Stage 5, loss of confidence. Beginning. Stage 6, fiscal dominance. Forming Stage 7, reset. Inevitable. We're not at the end, but we're closer to the end than the beginning. China exited. India stepped away. Hidden buyers are straining. Resource grabs are accelerating. And when the substitutes break, when UK, Belgium, Japan can no longer absorb, only one buyer remains. The Federal Reserve. What happens when the central bank becomes the primary buyer of government debt? What happens when that becomes permanent? And what does the pattern say happens to reserve currencies when monetization becomes the only option? That's not speculation. That's the final stage of a pattern that has never failed to complete. Because resource grabs don't solve math problems. They delay the reckoning. And when the reckoning arrives, only one question matters. What happens to a reserve currency that's being printed to fund its own government? That's the final fracture, the currency itself. And that's what we're tracking next. If this changed how you see what's happening, share it with someone who needs this clarity. Subscribe if you haven't. We're tracking this pattern in real time. And comment your biggest takeaway. What was the one insight that clicked for you? Because systems don't fail in headlines. They fail in plumbing. And we track the plumbing. Flows don't lie. Welcome to Geopolitics of Money.